Peter Laviolette lays out his expectations for the season and seems to have big plans for Alexis Lafreniere. We discuss this and much, much more on today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers.
You're Locked On the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 903 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, and today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And so let's go ahead, just kick things off with Peter Laviolette. His media session, met with the media, took some questions, and gonna spend pretty much all of today's episode talking about some of the things he said and some of the biggest takeaways from that little media session or press conference or, whatever you want to call it there. Definitely some interesting talking points to come out of it. I think the biggest one for me, and probably the biggest one for a lot of, listeners and just Ranger fans in general, what he said about Alexis Lafreniere, and specifically what he has planned for Alexis Lafreniere, which would seem to be something big. The reason I say that is the announcement that Laviolette made was that Alexis Lafreniere is going to start training camp at right wing. Now, of course, his natural position is left wing. The reason that I say that, this makes me believe that he has something big planned for Alexis Lafreniere is that I don't think you're going to change his position unless you're doing it to get him into the top six. I'm going to elaborate more on that in just a second. But first, just the position change for Lafreniere in general. For his part, Lafreniere sounds cool with it. He's talked about it in the past that, he's okay with it. He thinks he can handle it. He feels confident that, he can handle right wing just as he can handle left wing. Initially, when Lafreniere was drafted by the Rangers, it was interesting because you had to take Lafreniere number one. And I know some people, they've been underwhelmed with, Lafreniere's offensive output and just in general what he's done his first three seasons with the Rangers. I can understand that to an extent. But it was an interesting situation because he's a left winger. They had to take him. Every GM in hockey was going to take Lafreniere number one that season. But he's a left winger, and the Rangers have two really good left wingers in Artemi Panarin and Chris Kreider. So it created like a little bit of a log jam. And we've seen all three of those players at one time or another move over to the right wing to kind of give the lineup a little bit more flexibility. And there's been some debate even on this podcast about which one of them should change to the right wing. Looks like right now it's going to be Alexis Lafreniere. But yeah, it's a way to get three, players that you have big plans for all into the top six. And I will say, at first, again, I was against it because to me, you luck into this number one overall pick and one of the better players that was available in the draft in recent years. The last thing you want to be doing is messing with an 18-year-old by having them change positions. But watching Lafreniere play right wing over the years, there's been, at least for me, no noticeable drop-off in his game. And at times, and I've mentioned this in the past, I think he's done some of his best work as a right winger. We saw a line combination last year. Didn't really last that long. Maybe like 3, 4, 5 games. And then, maybe they went back to it once or twice later in the season. But the line combination I'm talking about was the second line for the Rangers. And that was left to right, Panarin, Trocheck, and Lafreniere, and those guys played well together. They found each other with some really nice passes. They seem to be spending the entirety of their shift in the offensive zone. Something kind of clicked there, but it wasn't a line combination that the Rangers, used with any sort of regularity. They would go to it every now and then, but it was never really like the second line. And maybe this season we'll see something like that. Maybe Lafreniere will be out there with Trocheck and Panarin on opening night, and he'll be playing the right wing. But again, to me, it's a good sign for people that are big-time Lafreniere fans and people that want to see Lafreniere have a bigger role with the Rangers, because the first thing you hear before we even see any line combinations or anything like that, and the Rangers are practicing right now as I speak, it's Friday morning as I'm recording this, but when you've got Alexis Lafreniere, when you hear that he's going to be starting at right wing, you're not going to move him from third line left wing to third line right wing. That would just be pointless. That there's nothing to accomplish there, because in that case, the third line left winger would probably be like Goodrow or maybe VZ, both of them can play the right wing. There'd be no point in moving Lafreniere from his natural position to his off wing unless, like I said, he's going to be in the top 6. You make that adjustment. You change his position to accommodate him into the top 6. I think that's probably what's going to end up happening here. And nothing is set in stone. Peter Laviolette touched on that as well. Even regarding Alexis Lafreniere, he said, just because he's out there on the right wing to start training camp, it doesn't mean we're not going to see him on the left wing. So we're very early in the process here. And of course, we do have the first preseason game this Sunday. But, again, I think for anybody that wants to see Alexis Lafreniere have a more prominent role with the Rangers, more ice time, and a chance to play in the top 6 with, guys like Panarin, guys like, Kreider, because if Lafreniere's at right wing, he can play with either of those two. Guys like Mika Zibanejad, well, then you're kind of getting your wish here because, again, you're not going to move him from left wing to right wing unless you're doing it with the idea of moving him up in the lineup. And I think that's what we're going to see, at least in the early goings of training camp. And Laviolette has mentioned already that, pretty much everything is up for grabs. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in today's episode as well. But nice to see Lafreniere getting a chance right off the bat here. It is also, and this goes back to what I just talked about, once again, worth noting that nothing is set in stone as far as Lafreniere definitely playing the right side. But this is what Peter Laviolette had to say as far as, the decision to try Lafreniere at right wing right off the bat. This is what Laviolette said the other day. I did have conversations with him. It's not like I did it blindly. I had conversations with him about playing the offside. He expressed to me that he's comfortable with that, that he looks forward to that opportunity. I'm looking forward to giving it to him to see what he can do. Again, that doesn't mean you're not going to see him on the left side in camp either. So there you go. That pretty much sums up everything that I just said. But Lafreniere, obviously being a team player here, this is something that, as I mentioned, he has expressed a willingness to do in the past. And even for people that are harsh Lafreniere critics, the one thing that I think you have to give him is that he is a pretty selfless player. He's been willing to do this in the past, and somebody that's always been a good teammate. So that's obviously nice to see, and we'll see about how Lafreniere fares on the right side. But this is what Lafreniere himself had to say about it the other day. I've always played left wing my whole career almost, but you got to be able to play both. And I think for me, I can be good playing right too. I just have to adjust a little bit, and it's nothing big. Just try and get used to it. And the only other takeaway that I have here is that if Lafreniere is going to play right wing, once again, it goes back to what I've been talking about. That would certainly seem to suggest that he'll be either on the first line or the second line. If you're going to have him change positions, it only makes sense he'd be in a top 6 role. So that leaves one more top 6 role for either Kakko or Wheeler. I would think it would probably be Kakko. I mean, you could go with Wheeler. It's certainly an option, but Wheeler at this point, 37 years old. He's somebody that's coming in to hopefully be one of the last couple pieces of the puzzle. The Rangers obviously got him at a discount, and he's on a 1-year deal. And again, we reaching kind of the twilight of his career. Kakko and Lafreniere, I think the hope among all Ranger fans, even those who maybe have not been overwhelmed by what they've done so far, is that they will eventually become superstar players and become big-time pillars of this New York Ranger team. Blake Wheeler, all due respect, phenomenal career. He's done a great job, a lot of longevity, obviously. Was the captain of the Jets for a number of years, but he is here on a 1-year deal. He is 37, and no telling if he's even going to be a Ranger past this season. So I like the idea of, maybe you put Lafreniere on second line right wing, with Panarin and Trocheck, and then Kakko's up there as he was, a decent amount of time last year with Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider on the top wing. And then you've got Blake Wheeler giving you some depth in the bottom 6 on the right wing on the third line. But we'll see. We'll see how they look to go with it. And in fact, they actually posted just a short time ago here the line combinations on Twitter for Friday's practice, which is ongoing once again as I'm recording this. So we're going to take a look at those in a couple of seconds and also talk about some of the big takeaways thus far from what Peter Laviolette has had to say to the media. We're going to do all that fun stuff in just a second. But first, we got to let everybody know today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Birddogs. Birddogs make you look good. Birddogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Birddog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. Birddogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice any movement. Birddogs uses anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. Birddogs are functional for literally any occasion. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnXXX or enter promo code LockedOnXXX at checkout for a free Birddogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnXXX for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take off your Birddogs. We promise you. All right, we just want to go ahead. Thank everybody, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And for the everydayers, you guys are definitely going to want to stick around. I'm leaning toward a special Sunday episode where we basically just wrap up everything that's happening or that has happened thus far in training camp. We'll put that episode up early in the day, be kind of like a nice little lead in to the Rangers preseason debut later that day at 5 p.m. against the Boston Bruins. And then, the episode after that will obviously recap whatever happens between the Rangers and the Bruins. But for right now, let's go ahead, keep the focus on Peter Laviolette's press conference. And I'm also going to talk about, like I said, the line combinations that were just unveiled on social media. But one of the other big takeaways that I got from Peter Laviolette here is that pretty much everything is up for grabs on this New York Ranger team. And, he's going to be experimenting with the line combinations and defense pairings. That's at least what it sounds like. But this is what Peter Laviolette had to say as far as, guys looking to stake their claim and earn a big role on this Ranger team. 2 days from now, lines are going to come out and they won't be the same the next day. I want to look at different parts and different pieces through training camp, see if there's a connection with any of the players, and give players opportunity to show what they can do in different situations. The same holds true for the exhibition games. It'll change through training camp. I really am a little wide open. I want to be wide open coming in here with what I see. And then he went on to add, my eyes are wide open. Come in here and take what you want, push for what you want, and I'm sure we won't miss it. And that's something that should be common sense in sports that, hey, there's competition. And if you want a bigger role, you can go out there and earn it. I feel like at one time or another, we've kind of lost some of that where, guys are just kind of assured that I can't say things like this without thinking about the Yankees. You guys know what I'm talking about here, but it just feels like there's certain times in sports today where certain guys are just assured of a certain role or a certain starting job, and they get to keep it no matter how they perform. So it is nice to hear this. Again, to me, this is all common sense stuff. If you play better, you get a bigger role. If you play better, you get more ice time, et cetera, et cetera. If you play bad, if you make mental mistakes, then you might be on the bench a little bit, or you might see your ice time decrease. To me, again, this is common sense stuff, but we've gotten to the point here where across a couple of different sports, maybe that hasn't been as common sense as it should be in recent seasons here, or recent times, I guess you could say. But he also mentioned once again, and I like this, that they're going to be experimenting in training camp. This is the time to do it. You know what? You've got training camp. We're about 3 weeks away from the regular season beginning. You've got 6 exhibition games, so take advantage of that. This is the time to mess around, play around with your line combinations, do different things with the power play unit. Give guys a chance to be part of the penalty kill, whatever it might be. Work on your system. Teach these guys what you want them to be doing, in all 3 zones and all that good stuff. And again, mess with the line combinations, even mess with the defense pairings a little bit. And, Laviolette even hinted that the top 4 Ranger defensemen, which has basically been untouched the last couple of years, he might even mess with that a little bit. We might see some Miller and Fox, and we might see some Lindgren and Trouba. I'm still kind of leaning toward, it almost gets boring at a certain point because, they go with the same defense pairings every single game. But, Lindgren and Fox, they're fantastic together. I think Miller and Trouba are very good together. Miller is, long, pretty much ever since he got into the NHL, put over Trouba for, helping him come along. And then Braden Schneider's out there with whoever the Rangers 6th defenseman of the week just so happens to be at that point. He's played with a lot of different guys, and it'll probably be either Gustafsson or Jones to start the season here. But again, this is the time to mess around and try some different things. So I know there's some Ranger fans that would love to see Miller with Fox. That would obviously be a really dynamic pairing. And then you put Lindgren and Trouba out there together. I mean, you show me a defensive pairing in this league with more snarl and more old school toughness and grit than the 2 of them out there together. So I'm open to the idea. Like I said, I still lean a little bit toward what they've been doing. But you know what? It's training camp. It's preseason. Let's see what other options are on the table. You got 6 games and all the different practices. So yeah, by all means, again, this is a time to experiment. Once the regular season starts, I'd like to see the Rangers, stick with mostly the same line combinations, mostly the same defense pairings. Obviously, there's going to be times where you need to shake things up a little bit, and they can cross that bridge when they get to it. But yeah, this is the time to experiment a little bit and just see what you have. And as I mentioned, once again, Friday morning as I'm recording this, and just before I hit record, a couple different Ranger beat writers posting today's line combinations and defense pairings on social media. So I wrote them into my notes, and I try not to think about it too much because I almost want this to be like a live reaction, but obviously I need the line combinations in front of me. So we'll just go through it real quick here. You got a top line, or what certainly seems to be the top line, left to right, Kreider, Mika, and Lafreniere. So this goes back to what I was saying about Lafreniere. If you're going to have him play his off wing, if you're going to move him from left wing to right wing, you're not doing it to move him from one side of the third line to the other side of the third line. You are trying to get him into the top 6, and here's proof positive of that. Lafreniere and Mika, I've always felt that the two of them have chemistry together. They haven't played together an enormous amount over the last couple of seasons, but when they're out there together, they just seem to have a feel for each other, and I would like to, eventually see the two of them get some run together, and maybe that's what we're going to get here. As I mentioned, Peter Laviolette said that whatever the line combinations are today, they will very likely be different tomorrow, so we shouldn't read too much into this, but it is interesting just to go through it and see what they're thinking. The second line, okay, so this is interesting. The second line, you've got Panarin, Hedl, and Wheeler. I've had some reservations about putting Hedl with Panarin, especially if Heedle's going to be the center, which at this point, it certainly seems like Hedl is a center going forward, just because, when Panarin's on the ice, I don't want to be conceding faceoffs, especially in the offensive zone. You want to win those faceoffs, and you want to, get set up and go to work there. And, every time you win a faceoff in the offensive zone, it's a scoring opportunity. And Filip Hedl, as far as he's come, and it was great to watch him have that breakout season last year, and I think the sky could be the limit for him this year. You're just conceding too many faceoffs when he's on the ice. And I don't know. I think I would stick with Trocheck on that second line. But again, they are experimenting. They're going to mess with some things. I'd be surprised if we don't see Trocheck and Panarin out there together at some point during training camp here. And then Panarin and Wheeler together, that's also interesting. As I've mentioned in the past, the two of them, there's a little bit of redundancy there just because, they are pass first players. They are facilitators. So there's part of me that would like to see them on different lines. I'd also like to see Kakko and Lafreniere both in the top 6, which, with these line combinations here, Kakko will not be in the top 6. He'll be on the third line. And speaking of the third line, left to right, you got Barclay Goodrow, Vincent Trocheck, Kaapo Kakko. So between Goodrow and VZ, those are the two that we're not really sure which one of them is going to be on the third line and which one of them is going to be on the fourth line opening night. I think, when you look at the way the Rangers are kind of set up right now, you could pretty much pencil in Bonino and Pitt. Like, they're both going to be on the fourth line. I can't see either of them, cracking the top 9 on opening night. And I think their third member of that line is going to be either Goodrow and VZ, and whichever one of them isn't there is going to be on the third line. So right now it's Goodrow. We know Goodrow, he can move up and down the lineup. He can play any position. You could pretty much put him anywhere you want. But that's a good physical line, between Goodrow and Trocheck. And, Kakko is somebody that can drive possession in the offensive zone, obviously. He's very, very good at maintaining possession of the puck when he wants to. That there's nothing like inherently wrong with that line. But me personally, I would like to see Kakko in the top 6 over Blake Wheeler. We'll see if the Rangers look to go that route on a different day. Perhaps, part of this too, now that I'm looking at this could also be, and I don't want to read too much into this, maybe they're trying to light a fire under Kaapo Kakko, and maybe they're just, giving some respect and giving a little bit of a nod to Blake Wheeler. First day of practice, you're the veteran. You've been there and done that in this league, and we're going to put you in a top 6 role, and we're going to put you out there with Artemi Panarin. That's also possible as well. And then the fourth line, you've got left to right, Jimmy Vesey, Nick Bonino, Tyler Pitlick. And like I said, Bonino and Pitlick, you can pretty much pencil the two of them into the fourth line, and it just comes down to which one of Goodrow and VZ is going to play the third line and which one is going to play the fourth line. I think I'd prefer Goodrow to be in the top 9, whereas VZ, could be on the fourth line. But, we'll see how they go. Like I said, it's very early, very preliminary, but always fun to see those first line combinations posted. And we can move right along now to the defense pairings. And as I was talking about in the past, or just a couple of minutes ago, which technically is the past, of course, we do have Miller and Fox playing together here. And Laviolette suggested that he might be, messing with the top 4 a little bit. And again, this is the time to experiment with it. The top pairing for the Rangers at practice right here, right now, today, as I'm recording this, K'Andre Miller and Adam Fox. Your second pairing then is Lindgren and Trouba. Your third pairing is Gustafsson and Schneider. And then, the fourth pairing, which, technically these guys would kind of be the odd man out on opening night if, this lineup holds. The fourth pairing, Ben Harpur and Zach Jones. So it's interesting to see, Gustafsson getting the nod here. Again, it might be one of those things where he's the veteran and you're just kind of giving him some respect and a little tip of the cap here to start on the first day of practice, actually in the lineup. But I'd be surprised if, we don't see Jones getting a chance to play with Braden Schneider going forward at some point here in the training camp. And really, when you look at the Rangers, their roster, as far as position battles and the battle to be on the opening night roster, it's basically just the 6 defenseman spot that's up for grabs. I think the 12 forward spots are mostly spoken for. I can't picture the top 9, the guys that were in the top 9 today, we know they're going to be out there. I can't picture Bonino being a scratch on opening night. I don't think Jimmy Vesey would be. If anybody would be a surprise scratch in favor of somebody else, maybe it's Tyler Pitlick. But I think the Rangers, again, they see Tyler Pitlick. I've talked about this in the past. They see him as kind of like the Tyler Mott replacement for this upcoming season. So I think the 12 forwards, those are the 12 guys you're going to see this team roll with. And then we know they're going to go with their top 5 defensemen that they've been going with the last couple of years. And that really just leaves it down to the 6 defenseman spot. And it's in all likelihood Gustafsson versus Jones. Maybe Ben Harper's a little bit of a dark horse. He played a good amount of games for the Rangers last year, and I would say exceeded expectations. But yeah, as far as a true battle to be out there on opening night, I think it's really just the 6 defenseman spot. So we'll obviously monitor that very closely throughout the training camp and throughout the preseason as well. Going to keep everything rolling in just a second here. I want to go ahead and talk about, some other big takeaways, including the fact that it seems like the Rangers are going to go with the same leadership group this year that they went with last year. And we will talk about that in just a second. All right. So this is something that I've been talking about on and off pretty much throughout the entire offseason. Once, we knew that Peter Laviolette was going to be the new head coach. It's something that really didn't get a lot of buzz on social media. I didn't really see a lot of other people talking about this, but I've been throwing it out there every so often. Who are going to be the Ranger captain? Who will be the Ranger captain? Who will be the alternate captains this upcoming season? Now, Jacob Trouba, I don't think he was ever in any kind of jeopardy of losing his captaincy, and Laviolette confirmed as much. When you just look at the fact that Jacob Trouba became the captain last year for the first time, it was his first season as the captain. You look at the fact that he just seems like a Laviolette kind of player. And by all accounts, the Ranger players wanted him as the captain. And even before last season, you go back to 2 years ago when they didn't have a captain, the Ranger players have indicated that he pretty much was the de facto captain even then, just didn't have the C on his jersey. So all that being the case, it just wouldn't make any sense for Laviolette to come in here and be like, nope, Jacob Trouba, you're not the captain anymore. We're taking away the C. You would make waves with your players immediately. Now, look, Laviolette has every right to do whatever he wants. It's his call who he wants to be the captain and who he wants to be the alternates. But that's the kind of move that I think would do far more harm than good. And, again, I know some people get on Jacob Trouba from time to time, but as far as the leadership and the accountability, I don't think there's really any contesting it. I think he did a nice job in that role last season. Always very accountable after games. We talk about the helmet throw when they were playing basically like garbage, and that kind of lit a fire under them. They went on a big winning streak after that. He just seems to have the pulse of his teammates and good go between whoever the coach is and obviously the rest of the players. So, yeah, Jacob Trouba never really, I don't think, in any danger of losing the captaincy. This is actually what Peter Laviolette had to say about Trouba. My conversations with him have been excellent. I knew him from before as well. He's a really good leader. I believe that he has a good voice in the locker room. I believe that his daily habits are excellent. He cares deeply about his teammates, about this team, about striving for success for this team. Those are qualities you want in a captain, somebody who cares about their teammates, somebody who leads by example, somebody who is willing to face adverse situations and be the guy who says something or does something or can right the ship. He certainly has those qualities for me. So that's quite the ringing endorsement. And you hear something like that, yeah, Jacob Trouba will be the captain for the New York Rangers this upcoming season. And when Laviolette talks about, knowing him from before, I believe what he's referring to is the 2014 World Championship. Laviolette coached him in that tournament. And Phil Housley, who's now an assistant coach for the Rangers, he was also on that coaching staff. So they know Jacob Trouba, at least from that, if not other times throughout his career. And as far as the alternate captains, now, that didn't seem quite as set in stone with a new coach and a new coaching staff. Again, there was little to no chance, I think, that the Rangers were going to, or Laviolette specifically, was going to take the captaincy away from Jacob Trouba. As far as the alternate captains are concerned, it's something that possibly could have happened, maybe even possibly still could happen, although Laviolette has said that he doesn't anticipate any changes there. And for anybody that needs a little bit of a refresher, the Rangers last year, now supposedly this year as well, have 4 alternate captains. You've got Panarin, Mika, Kreider, and Barclay Goodrow. I mean, you could do something different if you want. You could take the A away from Artemi Panarin if you're trying to light a fire under him or something, but that doesn't seem necessary. Honestly, I feel like Panarin, I know that obviously he had a rough showing in the playoffs last year. I feel like he's his own worst critic, which you go on social media, during the playoffs last year and after the playoffs, and you see some of the things that were said about him. That's saying a lot. But I think Panarin really took that hard, really took it to heart. I was really upset by how, he just couldn't really get anything going in the playoffs this past season. I don't think taking the A away from him really does much of anything. I mean, you could also kind of go the old school route if you want to, if you're Peter Laviolette, and you could go with, the same captain and the same 2 alternate captains every single night. If the Rangers were to do that, maybe Trouba's the captain and Mika and Kreider are the 2 alternates. They're obviously the elder statesman and the 2 guys other than Trouba that were kind of in the running to become the Ranger captain. But what does any of that accomplish, really? I think they're fine going forward with, Panarin, Goodrow, Mika, Kreider. You alternate the alternate captains and you just kind of roll the way you've been rolling. I don't think any member of that group has done anything to deserve to lose being an alternate captain. Now, if the Rangers, if they have a rough season, if they go down in the playoffs early this time, like they did last year, going into next season, maybe that's a conversation that you had, maybe a little bit of a shakeup as far as alternate captains are concerned. But for the time being, to me, it doesn't really solve anything. I think those are the guys that the rest of the team does look to. They're some of the few veterans in that room. I mean, you could throw an A on Nick Bonino if you want to, but again, it just wouldn't really make any sense. They brought in some veteran players. Blake Wheeler's a guy that's been a captain in the past. You could throw an A on him too if you want to. But again, a lot of these guys, these veterans, they're only going to be here for 1 year anyway. You're just upsetting the apple cart for no good reason if you shake things up there. So to me, it's the right decision to leave the same 4 guys as the alternate captains. And if you fall well short of your goals this season, which to me is to win a Stanley Cup, then maybe it's a conversation to have in the offseason. We will see. But for the time being, yeah, I think it makes all the sense in the world to stick with the same leadership group going into this upcoming season. I figure we can end on kind of a lighter note. I'm sure a couple of you guys saw this video on social media by now. But basically, Peter Laviolette at his press conference, he was being asked quite a bit about the system and specifically how his teams play very well in the neutral zone. I guess the Rangers were talking about how, playing the Caps last year, who of course was Laviolette's team last season. It was very difficult to get through the neutral zone and, they would just kind of stand you up there. So he was being asked all these questions about his system. And he posed the question to the reporters. He asked them if every new Ranger coach comes in and puts their system in the New York Post. So kind of a lighter moment there. But yeah, you know what? Hey, Ranger fans are a hungry bunch. They want to know everything about this team. They want to know all the ins and outs. They want to know what kind of system Peter Laviolette's going to play. I'm sure there's a bunch of people that were just waiting and refreshing social media pages to try to find out what that first set of line combinations and defense pairings was going to be. So kind of a lighter moment there. But yeah, I mean, Ranger fans are all over everything that this team does. Something else that Laviolette went on to say that I kind of found interesting. When you watch the teams that find success, they're pushing the pace, they're pushing forechecks, they're pushing pucks for speed, they're quick to defend. Everything has a pace and a speed to it. And this is something that I noticed last year. You get to the conference finals every season, and obviously there's only 4 teams left standing at that point. This past season, it was the Knights, the Stars, the Panthers, and the Canes. Just the pace of some of these games was off the charts. The Knights in particular, and obviously they're easy to single out because they went on to win the Stanley Cup. But yeah, I mean, they're just flying all over the ice, but they're doing so in a way where you feel like they're still playing within their system, and they're not like, playing fast and recklessly and doing anything to their own detriment. It's just everything, like Peter Laviolette was saying, has a pace and has an urgency to it. And the Rangers, they just didn't have that gear in the playoffs this past year. Maybe the first 2 games you could say they did, but that series fell apart, and the Rangers just felt like, for the majority, the last 5 games, and I know they at least won Game 6, but they just didn't have that pace. They didn't have that urgency to their game. They didn't have that quickness, and you guys saw what happened as a result. So, Laviolette has talked about establishing who you are right here, right now. That way you don't have to, flip a switch when it comes to playoff time and try to be somebody else and do something different. So, hey, that's obviously a good thing. And, the Rangers playing with, some urgency and some pace. That's going to be a good thing to see early in the season. And hopefully then it carries into the playoffs and the Rangers can play quite a bit better in the postseason this year than they did last year. I figure we could pretty much call it there for today. Once again, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.